Please join me in welcoming Shantanu Ray Chaudhuri and the truly formidable Sumant Batra to the stage to discuss what it really means to be a modern attorney in a world that needs both law and law.
Thank you so much, and a very warm welcome. Thank you all for being here to listen to Sumant Batra talk about. When I first got the title of this session, which is The Formidable Modern Attorney, for a moment or two I was a little confused because I didn't know whether the formidable modern attorney referred to the gentleman on the cover there or the gentleman to my left here, because he is as formidable and as modern as anybody. I have known Sumant for almost a decade now, and Sumant, before we go into talking about Arun Jaitley, he has moved from Sanjeev Kumar to Anarkali to JP Insolvency, the saga of JP Insolvency, then a memoir of his family's travels from Jhang in Pakistan to India during the partition, and now Arun Jaitley. So it's like how, and in the middle of it all, he is India's top and one of the leading insolvency lawyers in the world. And he also runs Cinemazi and a couple of other cultural forums which promote. So how do you manage to make the jump from Sanjeev Kumar to Anarkali to insolvency to Kafila to Arun Jaitley?
Well, thank you so much, Shantanu. First of all, for talking to me, and thank you so much, the organizers, Sagna, Pradeep, Vivek, for having me here again. You'll pardon me for my bad throat, it's just been bothering me. But for Sagna, I wouldn't have been here today. I would have excused myself, but please pardon me for my little hoarse voice. Shantanu, to answer your question, I think the only explanation that I can provide to this, because I don't really definitely have one, is जब आप कुछ शिद्दत से करते हैं तो वो ज़र्रा ज़र्रा का जो है वो आपको it makes it happen. But I think the only explanation which I'm able to offer whenever anybody asks that how do you do this multitasking, one single day do so many things, is that I do things passionately and God has a way to make things happen. I don't think I have any extraordinary in that sense. It's just I बिल्कुल शिद्दत से जुनून से करता हूँ तो रास्ते में आप खुल जाते हैं. It's probably oversimplifying it, but I don't have an explanation.
The fascinating thing is the shift in genres. Like Sanjeev Kumar is a biography of a film personality, and then you move into historical fiction, and with Anarkali. Then you move into something that is critically legal and has ramifications for the entire country, like JP Insolvency Saga. Then you move into a family memoir like Kafila. And you come to, like the joke we often share at each book launch is, okay, we have had this launch in December, I'll see you again in June with the next one. So, how?
Asha, my wife told me this time, if you launch another book the same year, I'm not coming. Because I have to buy a new sari for every launch. And she says it's quite a task, but that's on the lighter side. Well, I think the different genre, the shift is essentially because I want to continue to challenge myself and continue to discover myself, what all am I capable of writing. As you know, that I've already signed one more biography of a filmmaker, a very prominent filmmaker.
And also historical fiction again.
Yeah, but and also another historical fiction. But you and I agreed when I spoke to you that because I've just done a biography, I should delay the other biography by maybe 9 or 10 months and do the historical fiction because it's very different from America, although in the same genre. And I think I just find it more refreshing to be able to do a different book every time. Although when Anarkali became a success, I got so many offers, everybody wanted me to do another book. Why not Leila? Why not, Shiri? Why not another such character, make a series? But I don't write as a professional author or a writer. I write for passion, and therefore whatever interests me is what I write. And you know that there are a couple of books that we're talking about in genre, which probably we'll do another time. But I think that's probably also something that gives me encouragement to write with the kind of pace that I'm able to write.
Coming to the gentleman you have written about in your latest book, Arun Jaitley, what was it? What was that point, that drive that made you think, okay, this book has to be written? What was it about Arun Jaitley? At what point did you kind of say, okay, I've got to put this down now?
So I'm not a political observer, neither am I a political commentator. Neither am I a politician myself, but as a part of the citizenry of this country, you observe the politics around it. You see the proceedings in the parliament. And you will also see from the time when, Mr. Vajpayee, earlier prime ministers, or even later, you've seen the politics, you've seen treasury benches conduct themselves, oppositions conduct themselves. You've seen the political narrative, you've seen the demeanor of the politics and the politicians. And I found that over the last decade or so, the politics in our country, how the parliament is conducted, how the politicians respond or react or act in the parliament, is very different from what we used to see in the past. And Arun Jaitley is one statement that always comes to mind when you think of politics and the kind of politics that you want our younger generation to follow and experience, because the young are very disillusioned with the politics of today, and if I dare say also the politicians of today. And Arun Jaitley he belonged to an era where there was something called statesmanship, there was something called dialogue, there was something which is called as coherence, agreements, disagreements solved with great amount of dignity, and we make progress. And I thought that this young generation and the generations to come should know of such people who existed and keep their hopes alive in the politics, in political science, and in the parliamentary democracy. And I thought, therefore, Arun Jaitley, who's someone I knew personally and also professionally, and had observed him as a student of law, as a student of democracy, was one of the most befitting characters.
One of the most defining traits of Mr. Arun Jaitley that comes through your writing is something that we have lost in the last decade or so, the art of consensus building. He was a master at it. He sort of he maintained relationships across party lines, even with rival parties, and and made a lot of effort to bring across the other side to his point of view without any rancor. And so was that a defining trait of his?
Well, I would say one of the most formidable ones, but not the only one. So people generally associate his consensus building with GST reform. People say that had it not been for Arun Jaitley, we wouldn't have seen the GST see the light of the day. He was the one who brought the opposition on board, and also various state governments, where he built consensus around some of the most contentious issues. But not only that of course is true, and I've given a detailed analysis of how he built a consensus around GST. I spoke to many people who worked on the GST, including the finance ministers in different states. And all of them had obviously the same thing to say, that how would you even imagine saying no to Arun, because it's so persuasive. And not only that, Because when he spoke to you, he would listen to you first. And at the end of the day, you would feel that he has actually given the concession to you and not you. But you would only realize at the end of the day that he has actually taken three things out of four from you. But not only that, every political party leader that I spoke to had one thing in common to say about him. That he was a man who was a consensus builder. And if I'll just quote from Rajiv Shukla, Member of Parliament, very senior congressman, he said, Arun Jaitley was the ultimate solution finder. When ministries clashed, when committees reached dead ends, or when parties hardened their positions, a simple suggestion was circulated, talk to Jaitley. And he said, Sumant, we truly miss him. And he said that as Rajiv Shukla, a friend of Arun Jaitley, both in the cricket field as well as politics, and as well as someone as a senior parliamentarian, as well as a congressman. And the same came from whether it is Sharad Pawar's party, or whether it is Janata Dal, Akali Dal, everybody had one single thing to say about it, that things would have been very different had Arunji been around.
Not many in this current generation would know, and this is one of the major contributions of the book, is how the emergency, he was among the first satyagrahis, you called him among the first satyagrahis during the emergency, and it shaped his ideological convictions and later political style. And you also describe him as part of the bridge generation between the Janasangh stalwarts and the new BJP. What is it? How do you see those the emergency period and him being part of the bridge generation between the old Janasanghis and the new BJP? If you could just elaborate on that.
Well, Arun was somewhat different. I mean, from all the young Turks, whether it was Sushma Swarajji, Venkata Naiduji, Anant Kumarji, Pramod Mukherjee. These 4-5 young Turks are known to be the bridge, in a way, between the old Janasangh and the modern BJP. When in 1982 BJP came into picture, one of the most important decisions they had to take was to be more acceptable to a large section of youth which did not relate to BJP as much, at least in its old form, Janasangh. And each of these five young Turks had a very different characteristic and strength which sort of brought about that shift, which contributed very significantly to how we see BJP today. Of course, today, the chief architects in the modern, or today, present day BJP seem to be Amit Shah. But these are the people who actually brought that swing of the youth to BJP. And out of those, Arun Jaitley has one of the most modern faces. His vocabulary, his English speaking capabilities, as well as his articulation, because being a lawyer, a very successful lawyer in Supreme Court, someone who understood how to appeal to the youth while sticking to the nationalism of the BJP and his core agenda in his manifestos. He was able to sort of position BJP in a way where a lot of people who were perhaps not as right-wingers were also willing to listen to BJP. And this was Arun when he was in his school, college, university, a debater. Always an award-winner debater, English-speaking, smart, handsome, wearing jeans, kurta, a favorite among the youth. And then suddenly one fine day, finds himself being hounded by the police when the emergency was declared in the midnight. And he was arrested the following day. He managed to escape arrest that night. That's a long story, I'll give you the details, how he managed that. And then eventually, in Delhi University, he gave a speech for which he was arrested. And that was the first speech ever given by anybody in a public meeting after Jayaprakash Narayan. Everybody had announced Satyagraha, which is one of the bigger points for emergency, even though of course it was in the brewing for a very long time, as we already know. And that's why he's known as the first figure in that sense, because he was the one first to officially protest in public by mobilizing a gathering of the students in Delhi University. And of course, those 19 months in jail changed his life. And from a young aspirant who never wanted to be in politics, a young aspirant youth who wanted to become something in life, a lawyer, decided that perhaps his calling was to be a politician. And I think that was a turning point in his life.
You know, you mentioned him, you know, his in the aspect of him being a lawyer and one of the foremost lawyers. So, for years, Jaitley's identity as a jurist often overshadowed his political persona. Do you think he saw himself primarily as a lawyer in politics or as a politician with legal brilliance?
Well, till the time he was not appointed as the leader of opposition. When UBA, two happened. He always saw himself as a lawyer first. But when he hung his boots, that was the time when he said that I can't do justice to both, because he wanted to take his the responsibility as the leader of opposition very seriously. And then that's the time he actually gave his practice to one of his juniors, Maninder Singh, who became the election solicitor general later. But before that, he was always a lawyer first to people at large, even to his political party, and to himself. And even though when he became a leader of opposition and stopped practicing in Supreme Court, the lawyer in him never really died. It can't. He was a lawyer, always a lawyer. And that is something which benefited him as a leader of opposition and also as a Minister of Finance. And as you will see in my book, that even as Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister relied on him in the passing of the laws, not just in his own ministry as Minister of Finance and Ministry of Defense, on which he had a portfolio at a little point in time, but also across many other ministries, whether it was Triple Talaq, whether it's the Judicial Appointments Commission in the Law Ministry, or other ministries as well. He was a man to go to by even the Prime Minister in order to see that the legalities of any proposition, and not many people know that Article 370 as well was something, even though he was sick, was entire backroom planning, and the legal brain behind that was him, but never disclosing that ultimately Sangeeta Jaitley, Arun Jaitley's wife, she was one who I remember almost 1 year later at his university in Chandigarh, spoke to Tribune for the first time disclosed that the kind of meeting that used to take place in their house, in his bedroom with Amit Shah and the Prime Minister used to speak, and they devised the entire strategy for examining. So that lawyer in him was always alive till the last day.
And one of the greatest achievements is the way he went through enabling the implementation of the GST and the IBC also, like the. So if you could just, because you have been involved in the insolvency, I think you've interacted very closely with him on the insolvency conversations. If you could just, the importance of these two reforms, that he played a very, very important role in both.
So, of course, Arunji was involved in this whole spectrum of ease of doing business, which is starting the business, doing business, and closing the business from the time, Mr. Batra was the Prime Minister, the Business Minister, initially in the disinvestment department, full-fledged ministry, later information products, and many other ministries, even law ministry. But when Prime Minister visited US for the first time after becoming the Prime Minister in 2014. And he met global leaders and investors there, invited them to invest in India. Most of them told the Prime Minister, but where is your ease of doing business? Where is your exit law? Because most of the global investors, and World Bank, IMF too, understand the importance of an efficient exit law, that is insolvency law, in any economy. Nobody invests in an economy which doesn't provide a dignified, efficient exit in the event of like a difficult time, economically or even otherwise. So when the Prime Minister returned, he spoke to Mr. Jaitley and he said, "Ye karna hai, isko kaise kare?" And well, the GST is something that had already been rolled out to a large extent, because Mr. Jaitley was already speaking to Mr. Gelkar and to everybody to take forward, including to Mr. Chidambaram and everybody, that how do we take forward where the Congress had left behind as an unfinished agenda.
In fact, Mukul Rodriguez's father was one of the initiators of years ago.
Well, not really. Mukul Rodriguez's father was not there, but some of the people known in the family have also been involved in the initial policy formulation. But a lot of work had been done in the GST area, but the fact remains that there was no consensus. So when Prime Minister spoke to Mr. Jaitley assured the Prime Minister that, give me 1 year, I'll have it done. And an insolvency law that we had been studying, because I was associated with it from a very long time. And at the time when once I became the Prime Minister, Mr. Pawan, I think it's Mr. Pawan Gupta was incorporated as Mr. First Community Assistant. Then he will come to me if I'm not saying he and I had met and to persuade him to pay attention to the insolvency law. We would agree because he had worked in IMF, right? And Mr. Jaitley had already done some groundwork. But Mr. Arun Jaitley created history by not only enacting IPC in less than 1 year, but ensuring that it was world class. And not only that, I think India surpassed all its past track record, rather created history by implementing insolvency law like no other law has been done in the past. And you see that even 10 years down the line, because in 2026 June, we will complete 10 years of IBC. Not a day goes by where it doesn't make headline in all the yellow pages, all the financial papers or even other papers. It continues to make stories, headlines even today. And the kind of contribution it has made to the GDP is just phenomenal. It's mind-boggling the kind of money that has come back. Because of that, the banks that were at the verge of crisis in 2016, on the verge of collapse, today have less than 1% of non-performing assets in their books, which were over 10% at that point in time. All that is Mr. Jaitley's legacy. And of course, GST will see. Although of course, we've been able to last year iron out certain cases. From the GST took us almost 9 years. But I have no hesitation in saying, with due respect to the current Prime Minister, that had Mr. Jaitley been around, it would not have taken that long. Because he had the knack to solve issues by building consensus. He was a great communicator. No egos, no hesitation. He would just pick up the phone, reach out to people, talk to them, listen to them, get persuaded or persuade.
Yeah, in fact, that is something that comes, like this unanswered what if, you reflect on how decisions in the NDA's later terms might have differed had Jaitley been alive, in your assessment. Where would his absence have, where has his absence been felt most, like in terms of economic policy making, political strategy, judicial affairs? It's been not as smooth as probably it would have been.
Well, I don't know. I think this comment, when it comes to economic reforms, I have to say that because I work on the policy side quite a lot, not on the political side, but on the economic side, and a little on the legal side, is that they are leaving no stones unturned to advance the economic policies to sort of align with the goal of Viksit Bharat. And therefore, I mean, I think their will and their actions are quite, if I may say, aligned. However, the problem is that in implementation, we don't really have as much as connect with the ground as Mr. Jaitley had. He just wouldn't give up at making policies, passing the law. He would make sure that they were, in all respect, implemented with the same spirit with which the law had been drafted. So today, I mean, I feel that IBC could be more efficient than it is. But there's one thing where I think we miss him as much, Shantanu, we have 5 minutes on this. So the one thing that we really miss him is inside the parliament. We see parliament functioning less, we see, we don't see the kind of division that we see in the treasury benches and the boards and benches. I think with Mr. Jaitley, things were very different. And if you see that, I've quoted somewhere where, his humor and everything, this happened when, this was although at a time when he was in the opposition. Actually, this was Vice Minister, and then Women Reservation Bill at that point in time was being considered, and Mr. Praful Patel, as a civil election minister, he was sitting with his tie off. So Arun Jaitley, and it was very nice. Arun Jaitley sent him a slip across and saying that with a tie off and just a blazer, you look like a salesman, that kind of thing. And Praful Patel sent a note back. If the women reservation bill is passed from my constituency, it will be reserved for women. I actually may end up becoming a salesman. That was the kind of humor which traveled across the aisles in the parliament, even in the most tense moments. Abhishek Singhvi, when the book was launched, spoke about how when they were sitting across or walking across the aisles or in the corridors, used to talk and speak as if they were friends. But we don't see that anymore. That's where many of us miss.
Since we are running out of time, I had a couple of more questions. But one question that I really want to put to you, this is a tome of a book, like I often call it a doorstopper, like in the sense of it's almost 1,000 pages. What was the writing of it like? What was the process? What were the research points? What were the contact points that you reached out to? How did the book come together?
So I'll be very, very quick. I know the ladies only on the podium is a sign, but that's fine. We won't take more than 4 minutes. You see, the first and foremost thing was to get clearance from the family. You couldn't have been writing a book like that, of a man like that, whose personal friend and a very dear friend of the Prime Minister, of a man who the nation holds in such high esteem, without the family being, besides the first person I spoke to was Sangeeta Jaitley. And when she gave go ahead, I for about 9 months worked on the book. And my style is that I don't speak to anybody else until I've done my part of the book. After I finished the book, then I spoke to a few people, whether it was the people in the Prime Minister's office, the Minister's office, whosoever had worked in the cricket field or otherwise, went as well. Mr. Sehwag, in cricket, worked everywhere, lawyers and everybody, and including some of his friends. And once I had the draft ready, then of course I had to show it to Sangeeta ji, Arun Jaitley, and Sonali Jaitley, both children, because, and both are colleagues in the bar with me, so therefore all of them walk the same corridors. So they went through it, made some corrections as well, but they didn't really have any major suggestions to me in terms of what could be ousted or what could be kept. The 3 challenges that I faced was one, that how do you compress the life of a man as magnificent as Arun Jaitley in just about 7 pages? That was my biggest challenge because he has so many dimensions, and I hope sincerely that more and more people would write about other aspects of his life, other than what I have covered, or even more than what I have been able to cover. The second, of course, was to be able to stay objective about the man who I admire so much, that I work with, and therefore to stay dispassionate about him when you're writing, so that the objectivity comes across to the writer was another challenge. And the third, I think, was also to a degree that, how do you balance in 750 pages his various lives? Because if you...
He's also a very fun-loving person.
You could write a book on
his food.
His food. He was an encyclopedia of food. Mr. Badhav had only everything to say about the food. The sarge he would bring to the parliament for him, because every time he would come, he would bring something. So the fact is that, for me to sort of divide the chapters in a way I could do justice to whatever I was writing in those chapters was a big challenge. But I do hope that I will be able to do a degree of justice to whatever I have to do.
On that note, have we run out of time? Thank you so much. Thank you, Sumant, for doing this book, and really I urge the audience here to pick up a copy of not only this, his whole range of books published by Home Books International is out there, and this is a remarkable book on a remarkable man by a remarkable author. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shantanu, for talking to me, and thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. May I please invite